life was fabulous in the village. It was absolutely great growing up here. School was it was fun. The teachers were great. There was a good social kind of aspect to it as well. But I've got really fond memories of being at school. It was great.
So are there any events that stick in your mind about school?
I remember I did gymnastics from quite a young age. We had a teacher called Mrs Smith. She was a really, really small lady, and she used to do our gymnastics. And I remember winning the gymnastic competition, which was a real big surprise at the time. That was really good. We did inter-school quizzes. So we went over to Fradley and we did quizzes like that, which was good. So yeah, there's quite a few things that were at school.
Who was in your class? Do you remember anyone?
Oh gosh, yeah. There was Richard Haynes, Richard Burton. Oh my God, there were so many people in my class. Oh, how many can I remember? Oh God, what a really.
Is there anyone who stands out particularly?
From junior school, I think probably Richard Haynes was somebody that I used to play with around at school. I played with there was a couple of neighbours that were at school. One was a year older, one was a year younger, Tracy and Sarah Heathcote, so they were my neighbours. We used to play a lot with those. There was Vicky Sherratt, a lady called Vicky Sherratt. She used to live on Wellfield, and we used to, we got to sort of, I suppose, about 9 or 10, and we were allowed out in the evenings. We just used to walk around the village for hours and hours and hours, and we just walked everywhere. It was fun.
What sort of lessons did you do?
At junior school?
Yeah.
Well, it was sort of, I suppose, rather than having individual lessons, we just had one class teacher all the time. So I remember Mrs Green, who I think was in class 5, I think she did class 5. We did a lot of needlework with her. So I remember doing, I've got something that I did for my grandma and grandpa's 40th wedding anniversary, and I've still got that now because they've both passed away, so it sort of stood the test of time. So I enjoyed that. We did a lot of sport, at school. So Mrs Smith, the gymnastic teacher, she was quite prevalent in my life. And Mr Shear, who was the last teacher that we had at school, we did a lot of spellings with him, and I remember this little book that we had to write down every day at the beginning of the week, and then on a Friday we all got tested on it, so that's something that stayed in my mind.
What about the meals at school?
They weren't great. I remember these big jugs we had, these metallic jugs, and they used to have custard or like this awful chocolate syrupy sauce stuff, and you used to have whatever pudding you had, you used to pour this on, and they were really awful, and I used to hate that bit about it. I used to stand and queue up, and they'd get an ice cream scoop of potato and shove it on your dinners. And it was didn't matter whether you liked it or not, you just had to have something of everything. And I remember sort of the dinner ladies used to walk around and make you eat everything, and it was just sometimes the most horrendous thing.
So can you tell me about some of the teachers in a bit more detail?
Some of the teachers, I suppose, we had Mrs Faircliffe. She was the first teacher in class 1, and I suppose you sort of did a bit of reception work as well in there. And there was she was lovely. She was a really gentle lady, and that was just what you needed when you first got into school. And we had a dressing up area, and it was great. It was just loads of playing, and then you got stepped up into the next kind of phase. And we had Miss Naden. Now, she was a spinster, and she was quite strict. And I don't know if you remember when you were at school, but we used to have a piano playing every day in assembly to walk us in. But Miss Naden, whenever she got the guitar out, we knew it would be Kumbaya, and I hated Kumbaya. We all had to sit and sing it, and I'd be like, oh God, here she is with the guitar again. Mrs Smith, she was class 4 teacher, she was brilliant because she was excited. She'd just come straight from teacher training, I think. So some of the others had been there for years and years and years, but she was really very much sport orientated. So I liked her quite a lot. And one of the one that sticks in my head is Mr. Shear, who was the last class teacher. So I suppose he was preparing us to go to high school. But he was good. He was very strict, but had a really dry sense of humour. So occasionally he'd crack his face, and we'd have a bit of a laugh with him. He is good.
What did you do for recreation when you were a young child?
We used to. There was myself, Tracy Heathcote and Sarah Heathcote, my 2 next door neighbours. In the summer we used to go up to Wartfield, and there was this little bit, I don't know if you know at Wartfield, there's like a little sort of sandy bit, and we used to call it the beach. So we used to go down there, and we'd be sitting in our swimming costumes and have sunglasses on, and we'd be sunbathing because it was the closest thing to any kind of beach you would see any time. We did a lot of walking around the village. We did a lot of playing up at Wartfield, and they used to have these great big spun concrete. Do you know what I mean? Sort of the big spun concrete circles, and we used to play in there endlessly. We did a load of that. I say walking around the village, going up to the weir where we weren't meant to go because Mum wouldn't let us, but we used to because they were at work all the time, so that was fine. And we used to walk sort of up the 1/4 mile bridge, and there used to be a little, I think it still is, like a big piece of wood that goes across there, and we used to sort of dare each other to walk across there and stuff when we were little.
And is that the same when you were a teenager?
Oh, teenagers were, that was different altogether. We used to we'd go on the bus to Burton, and we thought we were the coolest things. And I think I was about 14 the first time I went on a bus. It was ridiculous. We used to go to Burton, and we used to go to McDonald's, and we'd have a milkshake, and then we'd literally get on the bus and come back again. That was as exciting as our lives became. That sort of thing.
How does village life differ for youngsters now?
I suppose I don't really know that many children that are around at the moment, but we used to just spend all our time outside. We were here, there and everywhere, and you used to go out in the morning and say to your mum, I'll be back for tea, and literally we were out all day playing and messing about, going up walking and what have you, and going to people's houses. So I suppose now, I mean, I don't really know about you guys, but I kind of get the feeling it's a little bit more insular. We had youth club and stuff like that, which I didn't tend to do, but I was in Brownies, Guides, band, so a lot of my growing up was circled around that sort of thing.
Please can you tell me about some of the places you remember in the village, perhaps ones that are no longer here?
Oh, places that are no longer here. I don't rightly remember. I remember the old school my brother went to. I was the first year that went to the new infant and junior school down Furlong Close. But my brother he went to the school which is now where all the new houses are. Do you know where it is? Just sort of opposite the canal. So I suppose I remember walking up there to meet my brother with my mum. So I suppose that's no longer there. We used to live down at Micklehome Drive, and we used to go and play at the spare ground and over in the fields, and those aren't any longer there because the A38 seems to have taken most of that. So I suppose I've not been here for a few years, so I don't know what's here and what's not now.
What businesses were there, and why were they there?
One business that I really remember was Mr and Mrs Dickinson. Now, if you walk up Main Street, going up towards the bridge where you can turn to Wartfield, there's 2 houses there now, but that used to be Mr and Mrs Dickinson's shop, and Mr Dickinson sold cold meats and sort of a general store, and Mrs Dickinson used to have all these jars of sweets and used to go and buy sweets by the quarter. So I vividly remember I used to go up there. We used to go and spend our pocket money up there, which was brilliant. And they were a really lovely old couple, and they were always as old as the hills. They always seemed to be old. And I can remember, Paul's Newsagents. I suppose most people can still remember Paul's Newsagents, which is now part of the co-op. So that used to be there. I'm trying to think what else there was. Those are the two that I can really remember.
How else has the village changed since your childhood?
I think it's a lot more dispersed now, and I don't think people know each other like they used to. I mean, I know people that have lived here all their lives. I mean, I left probably when I went to university, and I've lived in and around this area, but I think I remember I had some friends back to our house once, and there's a lady across the road, and she's like a curtain twitcher type, and she came and told my mum and dad. So that's the kind of that was the kind of village. You couldn't get away with anything back in the day, but I suppose nowadays everything. Whenever I walk round, I don't recognise many people, and people don't tend to stop and talk as often. I suppose whenever I drive through or walk through, they don't tend to stop and talk quite as much as it used to be. But that's about as much as I can remember on that.
And which buildings or roads or houses have been built or altered during your lifetime?
I remember when you go into Post Office Road, there's a house that seems to be extended round there. That all used to be all closed in. There's housing developments have sprung up all over the place. I mean, I remember walking up, sort of when you go up towards where the navigation used to be, which is now the Jaipur restaurant. There's a whole new housing estate built over there, which was never there, so that's really changed. I remember walking up towards where the church is, so if you were coming from Main Street going towards the church, over the bridge, there's houses there that were never there. It was just used to be open fields. There's so much that's been built into the village now, where it just literally used to be places we all used to play. So there's loads.
And what can you tell us about the girl guides in the village?
There was a lady called Mrs Hailwood who used to run the guides, and you just didn't mess with Mrs Hailwood. What she said went. She was a real feisty kind of I'm in charge kind of lady. Her husband used to rock up as well, and he used to be there. Her daughter went, two daughters went to guides. It was really good fun. It was a good sense of community. We did loads of things. We sang at Coventry Cathedral with the guides, things like that. But really, for me, guides was great fun. But I was part of the band in the village, the Scout and Guide band. So it kind of allowed me to do that, which was probably the most exciting thing that I did when I was younger. But it was good. The guides was fun.